something is when you get the next rash of joinings. So that is always something to be expected. All right, Danielle, why don't you go ahead and start the recording?
We are live, yeah.
Oh, we are. Oh, that's right. There's that, what that red button means. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, and I'm sure more people will join or not. It's a nice group as it is. Welcome to the July Interledger community call. Thank you all for spending some of your summertime with us. I think we have a pretty good agenda with some exciting stuff. You, from the calendar invite, or I'm sure Vanille or somebody will put it again in the chat. If you just logged on, you will see our open community notes-taking document. Please go ahead and sign in on the roll call, your name and who you're representing or what you're representing, whether even if it's just yourself. And you'll see the agenda there, which I will now jump into. CD, I think you're taking us into the beginning of it, talking about some recent, the UCT Hackathon debrief and some other exciting updates from that big event.
Cool, thank you, Chris. I want to share my screen just a little bit, but actually I feel like I might click around and
share the access.
Actually, I'm also happy to talk.
Yeah, you have the access.
Cool, thank you. Okay, just a moment. All right, please let me know once you can see.
Always a high wire act, screen sharing on Google Meet.
Especially with an audience. Okay, let's see.
Demanding visuals.
Okay. You got visuals?
I think we're on. Yes, we have visuals.
Okay, great. And you got audio. All right.
Oh, what happened there?
Is that gone?
It's gone. Well, we get a lot more people to come. There we go. All right, your audio visuals are good.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Maybe good evening, some of the folks as well. I just want to talk to you a little bit, and it's ever so slightly, because in August, we'll have much more of a conversation, and I think we'll even meet some of the people that'll have some pretty interesting and intense, interesting and informative things to talk about the week that we had at the University of Cape Town. This was more or less the last week of June. So from the 23rd to the 28th, we were hosted at the University of Cape Town in the mother city, what is referred to in South Africa, by the UCT, so the University of Cape Town Financial Innovation Hub. And this was primarily like a week for learning and then getting quite hands-on with open payments and beyond in the context of Interledger, as well as womanization. So what we had was an event that was open to the public, which was really cool. This was the second year in which the University of Cape Town hosted this boot camp and hackathon kind of week. And where last year we had about 36 student participants, 2 of whom were from institutions of higher learning outside of the University of Cape Town. So that was 2024. In 2025, this year, we had about 60 students. That was the average. We started the week with like 70, and I think 5 or so decided that they wouldn't complete the rest of the 65. And then 5 or so decided they wouldn't complete the rest of the week with us heading into the hackathon. But that was, from our point of view, quite record attendance, given that this was less than 1 week after the end of mid-year exams for students generally in universities and institutions of higher learning in South Africa. So 60 students that were like 3 or 4 days past, more or less, past their final exams from 4 different institutions in the Cape Town area. Kind of came together on the UCT campus, and the intentions were twofold. The first was to learn about innovation in the space of fintech, right? In the global context, and then to think in particular about what it is that's interesting or relevant from a South African student or South African community point of view. And then secondly, learning and getting quite hands-on with using open payments and the Interledger protocol in the context of innovating, right, for servicing or serving or solving problems, and innovating from a fintech point of view in service of digital financial inclusion in particular. So it was like, as somebody that is studying or living or has lived in South Africa, what are your thoughts about what some of these open technologies can mean to us as we move forward? We had the first 5 days, so that was the 23rd to the 27th of June. We had a boot camp, and the purpose of the boot camp was to get all of the student participants ready for the hackathon, which was held on Saturday the 28th. So the boot camp was divided into morning sessions and afternoons. The mornings were full-on lectures that were given by Dr. Alan Davids, who we will most definitely meet in the August community call. So please join us for that one. And he journeyed the students, because we had a mix of students from all sorts of disciplines: data science, data analytics, construction even, software engineering, masters in fintech, right? We had quite a broad set of students, not necessarily exclusively developers, within their programs, that were interested in or knowledgeable or curious about what this might mean, right? So they took this week this week in their school holidays to learn about fintech in general, and then the afternoon sessions were working practical or tutorial sessions where by the end of the first day, we had about 30 students that had gotten their Interledger test wallets, and we were working on them being able to deposit some funds and just kind of start to play around with what the test wallet looks like and what they can do, right? Or starting to think about or visualize what it means to use something that runs on or utilizes open payments in the way that we do. And also starting to make more concrete ideas around a wallet address or a payment pointer and what that would look like in a test context, so still very, very much in a sandbox context. We had the Friday afternoon lead us into kicking off the hackathon. It was a 20-hour hackathon or so. By the end of Friday afternoon, we had 60 students, 60, that qualified. And there were 1 or 2 conditions where we thought it would be fair to allow students to attend at least 3 of these sort of concept and bootcamp learning days in order to be able to fairly participate in the hackathon. So 60 students joined us to kick off the hackathon on Friday afternoon. And so we moved to a non-lecture venue and to an absolutely gorgeous venue in the design building. I think we will share images with you in the following call, where students that ended up being divided into 20 teams started working on and hacking away on ideas and problems that were pretty interesting, some pretty novel ones. There were quite a few students that were thinking about using the way in which open payments can be used in the context of either donations or like a charity platform or some form of supporting or giving support, without sort of profit or, in mind. Then there were some students that were thinking about how to incorporate the use of open payments with QR codes so that informal traders and merchants would be able to receive payments, but also so that people that were either underbanked or perhaps not even necessarily banked at all, but had some way of being able to account for their, let's say, income or funding in which they had, right? May be able to have a open payments enabled or an Interledger enabled digital wallet, and then be able to trade and start building more of a trade history that would allow them to do other interesting things like getting insurance and being able to be vetted for, albeit modest loans, but loans none the same. We had incredible presentations from all 20 groups. It took quite some time, but it was absolutely invigorating and fantastic. It was interesting to see this year that for the most part, perhaps 80% of the students of the groups that participated, perhaps 80% of the students that were part of the group were actually part of the presentation as well. So there was a good way in which each person got to focus on a particular area or communicating what it is that they worked on in a particular area. I thought it was also quite interesting that one of the team members that joined one of the groups was actually a construction management student that just happens to code sort of in his free time. And he became quite instrumental in then being able to build like a showable and viable demo for the end of the hackathon. So it was an incredible day of the students also getting to build some, I think, pretty unique relationships with one another. The team that came third, all four of them met on the Monday, so 5 days prior to the hackathon. And by the end of those 5-6 days, they had come third place in being able to work on, think about, and showcase something that was actually quite innovative. And yeah, we thought it was just a really cool way to think about the ways in which open payments can be applied in the real world. So I think I'll maybe stop over there, and we can take a proper deep dive and I believe meet some of the teams that joined us during the weekend on the hackathon, some of the winning teams as well. They will be joining us in August. So I will just take a pause and see. I think I saw a question come through, Stephanie, from you. Please give me a moment. Is it a difficult question about security and open payments? Let's see. I'm going to open the chat, one moment. How much of a security risk are QR codes in the hands of small business merchants? Friendly, but security colleagues say scan them in public. It's a great question. I most likely, I see one of our participants and winners is actually here on the call. So it's an excellent question, Stephanie. I'm probably not technical enough to be able to answer this in a really comprehensive or fair way. I think what one of the cool things perhaps about the hackathon space being more of a sandbox or like a safe sort of confined or controlled playground is that we kind of test out theories and ideas. One thing that I can say is that there are a lot of great ideas that are then sort of refined and built upon post the hackathon. So 3, and actually I believe I may be wrong, 4 of the hackathon projects that we saw or presentations that we saw from groups in 2024, so 12 months this time last year, have evolved and grown into actual startups that are being incubated by the UCT Financial Innovation Hub. So in that sort of incubation and growth period, they start to weed out, but also even pitch to investors and maybe even start to talk about folks that have greater expertise in particular areas. So the question about QR codes, their security, and the ways in which that can be worked with or not worked with with great success is probably one of the refining points worth working on. Certainly don't want to responding to that question any more disservice. So I think that's probably the best I can say. But yes, that's it for me, folks. Are there any other questions? You're welcome, Stephanie. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Danielle.
All right, thank you. Look forward to the deeper dive on that next week and meet some of the participants. A bunch of text updates in the agenda. There's some new blog posts. There's details about the just reopened, I think last week or on July 1st, of the Digital Financial Services Grant. So the link to that is there. There's a nugget about the summit and a link to reserve your tickets if you think you may be coming. It's a good idea to go ahead and grab your tickets. It's going to be a hard cap this year because we can't fit more than a certain amount in there. So you can always release them later, but the summit ticket link is there. If you think you want to grab one, they're free. Just want to call out that we have a lunch and learn on July 16th with one of our ambassadors, Mitri, that you can also get the link to past lunch and learns there. And we've got some other things coming up, including that the Rafiki Work Week is happening right now. In fact, they're probably taking a break to join us to some degree. So, Iona, I think you were set up to talk a little bit about the work week, and so the mic is yours.
Hey, yeah, I'm literally there at the work week, and unfortunately alone. It's very silent. The rest of the team is at an activity that unfortunately overlapped with the call, but they were upset and they did say hi. We are a bigger group this time. Most of the work weeks that we do this year were like smaller because we did one with our partners from Breakpoint and one on web monetization, but the Rafiki team, as we incorporate partners, is one of the largest that we organized during the year. We met in Cluj-Napoca, Romania, where we have access to Breakpoint office, and we invited people from PCH, our partners in Mexico, people that they work for, like a security with them, and other entities that we work with. Besides the team being such a diverse and large, or we are around 35 to 40, I think the topics that we cover these days are also diverse. I did not get a chance yet to put them in the document, but I will do it after I finish talking, but I'll set it here in the chat. We have 7 to 8, I think one changed its topic, so that's why I didn't add it. But we work on, as you can see, extremely diverse, from super technical or deep dives on Rafiki Kubernetes operator to improving general documentation, adding multi-tenancy towards the docs that we have, or even a larger one, services for cards and stuff like that in the future. This is a brief update, as the team is still ongoing till week at the Rafiki Work Week, but I can promise that we'll have a blog post about it and some posts that you can check or add more questions, and definitely use the community Slack, where we have the Rafiki channel, where you can always ask questions about different things. Try to contribute, that everything is open source, and you can ask or try to integrate Rafiki even as a project for learning or knowing more about the Interledger ecosystem. Yeah, I think we started with a heat wave here in Romania, and today was a stormy day, so refreshing reindeers, and also we covered everything. I think the word for the week will be diversity, both from team participation, technicalities that we approach, and also the weather. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll add more details in the document, in the agenda right now.
Awesome. Thank you. There's also in probably August and blog posts and other things. Always great updates that come out of these work weeks. So, you know, I think get to Friday. But then I imagine a pretty steady stream of updates, announcements, advancements, and areas to collaborate and so thank you. Awesome. I think the rest of our updates here are basically text-based updates. Was there anyone that wanted to open the mic and speak to updates? Hold for seconds. Going once, going twice. All right, you can deal with the text-based updates there. And we will hand over to the team that went to the Internet Governance Forum and some of the
Chris, I think you. Yeah.
I don't know if it's on my end or if it just broke up, but I think the call might have been handed over to me, in which case I'm just going to take over if that's okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. Let me just try and share my screen, and hopefully this will work. All right, now let me see if I can get this into slideshow mode. And I trust that you can see my screen at the moment. So hi again, everyone. My name is Aiden Federline, and I work on public policy here at the Interledger Foundation. And along with my colleagues, Chris, who you just heard from, Brianna, who can't make today's call, and our grantees, Stephanie and Shruti, I was in Norway in late June for the 20th United Nations Internet Governance Forum. And we were there to socialize some of the ideas that have originated from a document that an Internet Governance Forum working group has developed, which is essentially a framework and a call to action for how we can transform digital financial infrastructure to be more open, inclusive, and interoperable. And if you're wondering, why would it be the role of the Interledger Foundation to socialize these ideas, then let's take a step back for a moment and begin with a foundational idea, which is who runs the internet? And the short answer is no one runs the internet. And yet, in a sense, also, I shouldn't put animations in because I never know if they're going to work or not. In a sense, everyone runs the internet too, because the internet isn't owned or governed by a single authority. It is a decentralized, distributed network built and maintained through cooperation. Its functionality relies on protocols, on standards, and on shared governance structures. It thrives not because one entity controls it, but because multiple entities coordinate and collaborate. And we were at the IGF because we wanted to take forward some new ideas that others were not contributing. We wanted to say that the same logic that underpins the internet, not just technically like parallels between TCP, IP, and the Interledger protocol, but like the governance layer logic can also be extended to the way that we think about digital payments and financial systems. And so that is why we were there. And to manage something as complex and as foundational as the internet, we rely on what is called the multi-stakeholder model. There are different multi-stakeholder models, but what I'm referring to here is the model that the IGF uses. And that means that governance is shared across diverse groups, governments, private sector actors, civil society, and the technical community. Technical community you can think of as really like standard setting bodies. Each brings unique perspective, interests, and forms of expertise to discussions. And the Internet Governance Forum, and by extension, the dynamic coalitions within it, are living examples of this model in action. The IGF is a policy shop. It's not a standards body. It isn't like the IETF, which believes in running code and rough consensus. The IGF believes in open dialogue and informed cooperation. It accepts and it expects disagreement. And I would argue that a lot of what we're trying to do here within the Interledger community is similar. Ultimately, we believe that the same collaborative spirit that shaped the internet can and should shape our financial systems too. And we're trying to surface opinions and we want everyone to be on an equal footing. We don't want to be privileging any perspectives or stakeholders above others. And so I also want to ground our conversation here a little bit in two quotes that have guided the broader internet governance community over the past 2 decades. You have this quote from John Perry Barlow in his 1996 Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, where he wrote, "The internet is inherently extranational, inherently anti-sovereign, and no state sovereignty cannot apply to us. We've got to figure things out for ourselves." You know, it's a slight oversimplification. It's 20 years ago, of course, and we have different understandings now and different jurisprudence around jurisdictions. But I mean, the basic idea remains the same. We have to cooperate. We need to come together to propose ideas. We all have a responsibility to make the internet work. And similarly, we have this quote from the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan: "While technology shapes the future, it is people who shape technology and decide what it can and should be used for." And these values have inherently shaped internet governance. And it is within that spirit that we entered the IGF in good faith to propose different ways of guiding digital financial systems. And if you're wondering, like, what is the IGF? Well, IGF stands for Internet Governance Forum. It is a global multi-stakeholder platform convened annually by the United Nations. It was created to facilitate dialogue on public policy issues related to the internet. It doesn't produce treaties or binding resolutions. Instead, it functions as a sounding board, a think tank, a bridge. It brings together diverse stakeholders to share experiences, to identify gaps, to surface tensions, and to develop shared understandings. Topics and issues that are discussed range from cybersecurity, privacy and data protection, AI, digital inclusion, which is understood more in the sense of connectivity, I would argue, infrastructure, digital identity, and with Interledger's push, we are starting to surface some conversations on digital financial inclusion as well. And let me just move to the next slide. That's me. You can see me with my little Interledger lapel pin here. So why does the Interledger Foundation engage in the IGF? Because ultimately we are building infrastructure. Infrastructure must be open, it must be secure, it must be global, it must be interoperable. And infrastructure by its very nature belongs in policy conversations. Infrastructure is not something that one stakeholder hoards, you share it. And the IGF provides a neutral, globally recognized platform for us to have some of these conversations, to be able to, in the future, ensure that the open financial protocols that we are championing are understood, are respected, and are included in broader digital governance conversations. And so we were there ultimately to shape norms and to collaborate on global digital public goods. And in many ways, it's an articulation of our work in a new sphere. We also acknowledge and accept that regulation does affect how systems operate. We think that better outcomes come when experts are heard. And technical experts, policymakers, civil society leaders, affected communities aren't always in the same room. And yet, regulation does affect how financial systems are built, how they're accessed, how they're governed. And so the Interledger Foundation created the Dynamic Coalition on Digital Financial Inclusion to provide a space for some of these discussions to take place. Now, it's important to emphasize that we are the rapporteur for this work. We have funded this work, but the work products are developed by subject matter experts and are independent of the Interledger Foundation, and that is important. And so when I'm going to talk in a moment about the policy blueprint that the Dynamic Coalition has put out, you will notice that it's not referring by name to the Interledger protocol. You may happen to have noted that the Interledger protocol meets many of the definitions that we're putting forward, and that's great, and that is perhaps a recognition that it is a building block, if not a digital public good, at least a building block that supports the creation of digital public goods. And so, in theory as well, other interoperable financial protocols, if they existed, could meet this definition, but other messaging protocols that I can think of at the moment don't. But if they were to all follow the principles that our experts have agreed are important, that would be a win for everyone. So the IGF itself, just to sort of clarify, it's an annual ceremonial event. It's not where the real work takes place. The real work for our Dynamic Coalition has been happening in virtual working group calls. So our engagement isn't just 1 week a year, it's been an ongoing process. And the IGF is also not the only forum where regulatory discussions take place. There are national consultations, sectoral fora, industry alliances, different self-regulatory spaces, but the IGF is unique in its breadth of issues, its neutrality, its commitment to open dialogue, and many of the key principles that the IGF embodies, I would argue, align closely with Interledger's values. Fair processes, promotion of open, distributed, interoperable infrastructure, transparency, multi-stakeholder cooperation. And I think those are also principles that provide a solid foundation for inclusive digital financial infrastructure as well. So I'm going to pause here before I introduce the work that the Dynamic Coalition has been doing, and I'll invite my colleagues, friends, grantees who were also on the ground to briefly share some reflections from their time in Norway, if they would like. I don't know, call on you, Stephanie, but I did see you during the call. So if you wanted to share anything about your time in Norway, very much welcome you to do so too. And I'm just reading the comments in the meantime.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay, very good.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to say I've been to 2 or 3 of the previous IGFs, including the very beginning one, and back at WSIS, the World Summit for the Information Society. That's what really launched the Internet Governance Forum. And I was a bit cynical at the time. I was working for the Canadian government, so that there's nothing like working inside government to be a trifle cynical. I did think that a lot of this talking fest that was happening or being encouraged would not produce results, that it would just keep civil society out of the hair of governments and big business who were busy trying to figure out how to commercialize the internet at the time. I think I was wrong. I think that a lot of good activity has come from this, and by activity, just as you say, it's what is happening in these dynamic coalitions. It's what's happening in villages across Africa. One of our guys from ICANN was there saying it's what we bring home to people who maybe don't have proper access to the internet, maybe have to share resources, but they get a lot of learning from these events and from the dynamic coalitions that continue to work on things. So I think it's really good to have this dynamic coalition. I was very impressed with the one on disabilities because, quite frankly, governments have to be pushed, and companies certainly have to be pushed to make sure that the technology keeps pace and allows people with different abilities, blind people, for instance. The person who was on that panel with you is the blind guy from Pakistan who is just amazing, all the work he's done trying to influence standards, trying to make sure that people are not just sort of brushed aside and cut out of access to technology. So I think it is important, as you didn't really emphasize the fact that this may be the last one. We hope it isn't the last one, but the decision will be made this year. And as you know, the US isn't funding things, and the ITU in general is going broke, and the UN has many other priorities. So we certainly hope they won't dump this. If they do, then we'll have to find a way to keep the dynamic coalitions going with other means. It's not as if the IGF, apart from giving them an annual event, it's not as if the work can't continue without it. That'll be plan B, though, in my opinion. I think it's up to the UN to do this. So the one thing I would add to your excellent description of all this is financial inclusion is not identified specifically as a human right. If we want to advance it as a human right, we can certainly find places in the human rights documents that exist that lead you logically to endorse financial inclusion as a human right. But I think that's got to be at the heart of some of the work that's being done here. Otherwise, financial inclusion isn't going to happen. Somebody has to pay for access to people who aren't a good financial risk for the private sector players. And having spent umpteen years at ICANN watching how that particular multi-stakeholder community works, you know, Google is there on every single committee. They're on the technical committee. They're on the IP committee. They're on, you know, and they fund civil society. So they're well represented in civil society. The same is true for Meta. The same is true for all of the big tech companies. They're there. So that's who's running the internet. I put a link to an interesting podcast that Cory Doctorow has put together on who runs the internet. It reinforces your cynicism about how things are turning out, but it also, I think, encourages us to continue to make these efforts. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Thanks. I did enjoy the week there, and I enjoyed seeing some of the really great work that's going on at the ground level.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. And what Stephanie said is true, that potentially this is the very last IGF. My personal view is, I don't think it will be. I think that it will continue in some form. I think it is very possible it will not be an internet governance forum next year, but a digital governance forum or something with something of a different mandate. But it is very difficult for me to believe that the UN would cede this ground and decide that they do not want to be involved in a field that is inherently international and multi-jurisdictional and as economically important as the internet. It's really, even despite all of the UN's budgetary issues, it's very difficult for me to accept that they would cede this ground. I could be wrong, and if I am, you should call me out on it in a few months' time. But we will see. And also worth noting that the Sustainable Development Goals will be the review process for the Sustainable Development Goals, which are the guiding activities that inspire the various UN agencies to be working to achieve in their activities, the review process will start later this year for 2030 to 2045. And so this is also a time when we may decide that we want to be involved, and we as an Interledger community, ensuring that digital financial inclusion is represented within those new goals. You could argue that within the current Sustainable Development Goals, financial inclusion is recognized as important, but I think there's going to be work around moving that towards financial health and not necessarily digital financial inclusion. So I just want to flag that as something that's going to be emerging soon, and maybe a conversation we want to have collectively later in the year, when the modalities for participation are better understood. And sorry they didn't have a photo of you, Stephanie. There's a photo on the screen of Shmiti. I only had a small window of time this morning to put the slide deck together, so I was quickly searching my camera roll trying to find some images. Oh, I forgot about this slide. So yeah, let's briefly touch on the challenges that the Dynamic Coalition has been exploring at the IGF. It may be one that you're familiar with, because despite the growth of digital financial services, billions of people remain excluded. Systems we rely on are fragmented, they don't talk to each other, they're expensive to use, they're hard to integrate. They're often designed around not human needs, but institutional needs. And this great AI tool, DALL-E, generated this image for us to show that, at the moment, we essentially are building new roads to every payment rail, slow, expensive, siloed. And here's our hypothesis as a dynamic coalition, and I think even as Interledger Foundation technologies evolve, they start as purpose-built for isolated problems. They eventually converge into common standards that support broader ecosystems. And you could think of this as what Interledger is calling the Internet of Opportunity, right? That interoperable payment protocols are the next evolution of financial infrastructure. They can be endlessly adaptable, neutral, flexible. So as technologies converge, we have common standards, broader ecosystems. Imagine being able to share a road instead of having to build a new one each time for each individual payment rail. So the Dynamic Coalition has been meeting for over a year now. It's produced a policy blueprint that offers a practical policy. I was going to say it's policy ready framework, but it's not quite policy ready yet. But it does offer a framework to guide the development of inclusive financial infrastructure. It also poses a lot of questions that we think regulators and other supervisory authorities need to be thinking about and providing answers to. It stems from desk research as well as stakeholder interviews that we've done and our own internal discussions as a dynamic coalition. And we've tried to ground it in technical realities and also to orient it towards regulatory feasibility. We want to keep this not as something that sits on a shelf, but something that you can actually take and think there is a reasonable shot that this is politically attainable. We think it's guided by the Interledger Foundation's values of openness and inclusiveness. And we have tried our best to conform to UN practices around designations and terminology. Certainly no one's complained so far. And we did submit it before printing it to UNDESA, which is the Department for Economic and Social Affairs, and we didn't get any, no adverse feedback was received. So inside the blueprint, it's really organized around 4 pillars: open and inclusive governance, adaptive technical standardization. I'm paraphrasing here, it's worded a bit differently in the blueprint, but I'm calling it, just the ease of reference here, flexible risk-based regulation and consumer-focused ecosystem design. And so to go through each of these pillars really briefly, open inclusive design, we think that financial systems and interoperable payment protocols should promote active and informed multi-stakeholder participation. Informed is an intentional word choice. It's not enough just to have active participation. It's not enough to have token participation. The participation does need to be informed by evidence. We want to promote iterative and adaptive governance that evolves with societal and technological needs, ensuring that accessibility, inclusivity, and safety remain foundational principles throughout the protocol lifecycle. We want to prevent capture by monopolies. And we also reference 2 other frameworks, the DPI standards and the modern paradigm for standards principles that the W3C, I believe, developed, which we think are worth considering and are worth ensuring that we're not reinventing the wheel in everything that we do, that other open and interoperable protocols are also built off of frameworks that make sense. And we've put out those 2 as frameworks that we think are very sensible. In terms of the second pillar, adaptive technical standardization, so we are calling for interoperability across currencies, ledgers, and borders. We accept that standards need to be flexible and modular. One size will not fit all. We want standards to be designed for affordability, access, and localization. We're quite clear in here that there may be some trade-offs that are required, and we don't want a standard to become so expensive to implement that it undermines the entire purpose of achieving digital financial inclusion. So there does need to be, sometimes when there are trade-offs that have to be made, we do want to be encouraging a new financial system to be low cost. We want to avoid lock-in by privileging adaptability over sophistication. We want to accommodate varying data sovereignty requirements, and we support voluntary market-driven adoption. We don't necessarily think mandates are the most suitable way for a standard to be implemented. In terms of the third pillar, flexible risk-based regulation is how I'm paraphrasing it. Complementing cash, we're a huge supporter of digital payments. It makes sense that in a lot of cases, they don't make sense to everyone. And so we're not saying to replace or to discard cash, we're saying that we should be complementing it. We want to be protecting privacy and autonomy in transactions, but we also do have some language in the paper around, it's always a balancing act. We're not looking to protect privacy at all costs. We are wanting to prevent money laundering and to counter terrorist financing, but we do want people to feel safe using digital payments as well. We support multi-currency and cross-border flows. We support proportionate risk-based compliance. We want to prevent coercive or exclusionary deployments of technology. And also, this last one is really about cryptocurrencies and stablecoins, which is to say, we do support technical interoperability across asset types when regulatory and consumer safeguards are met. So if there is a stablecoin or a central bank digital currency that has consumer safeguards in place and regulatory compliance, we do think that a system should support it. But where those safeguards are not met, well, that's not what we're necessarily putting out there. And we think this is just realistic around what monetary policy central banks, treasuries, others going to be comfortable with. And the fourth pillar is, and also I think it's personal view responsible. The fourth pillar is around consumer-focused ecosystem design. So we're wanting to prioritize trust, usability, safety. We want to ensure that digital payments can be made offline. And we mean that in two senses. Offline in the sense that there's a connectivity outage. There does need to be some way to make a digital payment still up to a certain limit. There's an earthquake or something, you don't have connectivity. We want to be able to ensure electronic payments, but also in the sense that someone wants to make a digital payment in person. They're at a market stall, they want to pay for their groceries. They should be able to make that digital payment in an offline manner. We want to be, a lot of the recommendations center around agency, wanting to give consumers control and the ability to consent or not to consent to certain actions. We want to be integrating financial literacy, redress, and feedback loops into processes. We think that new financial systems should correct the transparency faults that are in current banking systems, which often obscure security risks, fees, and the repercussions of errors or omissions. And we also want to be encouraging there to be clear and accessible data published around complaint resolution and fraud prevention processes to really reinforce accountability, because at the end of the day, we're trying to promote financial inclusion, and that central to trust is that systems are secure and that you have redress if you are unfortunately harmed in some way. And so ultimately, we're really oriented the recommendations to what we want governments to do. So we think that governments can encourage voluntary adoption for incentives like grants, tax breaks, or subsidies. We want to support public-private partnerships to fund and maintain protocols and software as public goods and core elements of digital public infrastructure. We want there to be accountability structures to ensure that community needs are being met and not just commercial interests. Commercial interests should also be achieved, but again, balancing act. We want to encourage governments to be developing bilateral or multilateral or multi-stakeholder agreements to align regulatory and legal frameworks in a way that supports interoperability. We want governments to be funding educational initiatives that build digital literacy and financial empowerment skills and that address inclusion gaps. And we think, again, it's not that there's not a role for philanthropy to play or there's not a role for civil society actors to play here. We just think there's a special obligation on the part of governments to fund these initiatives, not necessarily to do the work themselves. And we also call for governments to support civil society and consumer protection groups so that they can participate in the development and oversight of these efforts. Oh, sorry, I can't really read the text at the bottom, but I'm sure it's just calling for everyone to play their role here. And then ultimately, sorry, Stephanie does a QR code, but I haven't done a security assessment on it, but it was generated by Google Chrome, and hopefully it's not asking you for redirecting you to a payment or something. It should just be a PDF document so that you can read the policy blueprint in full. And then there is also a link that I will put in the chat so that you can also read it. And I guess just to close, back where we started, the internet didn't become the transformative tool and force that it is today because of any one company or government. It succeeded because we chose to cooperate. It succeeded because we invested in shared protocols, open standards, and inclusive dialogue. And as a dynamic coalition, we believe that financial infrastructure should follow the same path, that payment systems should be open by design, interoperable by default, governed in the public interest. And this blueprint is a contribution to that effort. It is a tool for policymakers to help them ask the right questions. It does not have all of the answers, but maybe it has some. And it is a work in progress nonetheless, but something that we will continue to revise. So I would just thank all of the members of the Dynamic Coalition, some of whom are on the call today, for all of your work in contributing to this effort. Thank you so much. And to the Interledger community, we invite you to read the blueprint, to share it, to use it in your own work, and to help us shape what comes next. If there is a phase 2 of this work, what does that look like? And we have some ideas that's a conversation for another time. So I will end here. Happy to take any questions, but I've also probably gone well over time, so my apologies for that.
Hopefully my audio is a little bit better. I tried to stay quiet because it was breaking up. Yes, any open questions? I want to open my mic and ask any questions of this work. I do think there's going to be lots of opportunities to continue to contribute here. We also are looking for folks that want to say, hey, we believe in this as well. So if there's are opportunities, if there's something that you heard here, projects, consortiums, grantees, et cetera, we'll be looking for folks to kind of kick the tires and think about how this might inform what they build and how you build. But Stephanie, you had a question.
Yes, if I may, and it's more of a comment than a question. I typed something in the chat too. I really think that point that you had on an earlier, a slide in about the middle about avoiding monopoly capture or something, words to that effect, is really important. And I realize, and we've been chewing over this document back and forth for quite some time, but I think the concept of fair competition, we've used the word interoperability a lot, and part of interoperability is fair competition. And if there's, and maybe I've just been listening to Cory Doctorow and his Who Broke the Internet too much, but let's face it, we do not want an Amazon Prime approach to financial inclusion. We want to let a million flowers bloom, right? We want to support local small endeavors. That's interoperability, but it's also fair competition. And I think maybe we should introduce that term more often because it's super important. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I'm having computer issues. But with that, more to come on that. We'll see you in 1 month's time for the August community call. Unless anyone has anything they need to jump on and say, we will bring this one to a close. Thank you to all our speakers and guests. Thank you for Vanille for continuing to drive this, and look forward for details for next month. Bye, everybody.